Good afternoon, Wargamers. My name is Mechrad, and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a little while since I've been on. I got really busy with Warhammer tournaments and work and stuff, so I wasn't able to record for a little bit, but I'm back now. And what better way to celebrate me being back by doing a tier list of the brand new Skaven Battletome. I say brand new, it's been out for a little while now, and people have been able to get their teeth into it, including me. And I've got opinions on all of these lovely troops, so let's not waste any time and let's get into it. I got 5 tiers, my usual 5. I got my build around me tier. These are for units that are so strong that they enable a game plan by themselves, or they enable the list to be built around them. Up next is good inclusion. These are units that are solid, but not auto includes. They can just happily find a place in your list and they'll be just fine. Up next is good if points go down tier, and this is for troops that are good if points go down. They're just too expensive right now, but they have good war scrolls at least. Meme tier is for units that are maybe playable with a funny, weird strategy, but generally have glaring weaknesses or bad war scrolls that are keeping them from being good, like even if their points go down. And the last one is bad war scroll, which is just the war scroll is fundamentally bad. Points can't save it. It does nothing. Just don't play it. So yeah, those are the 5 tiers, and let's get into the tier list itself. We're gonna start with the Death Master. I'm gonna put him in good if points go down. I was actually theorizing some funny Death Master lists with some of my friends. We think that there's a possible Monster Mash list to be made with Screech and the Verminlord Deceiver. Since both of them have the Ashen keyword, you could give them run and charge, which is kind of cute. Makes them very fast, mobile, and able to, you know, play Monster Mash. It's also decent with the Night Runners, the one Ashen troop that we have. Night Runners, yeah, it's pretty good. He's just really expensive. He's 160, and for not being a priest or a wizard and giving a somewhat niche buff, like run and charge is really good, but we're not ogres, you know. So we're not gonna like alpha people and just grind them down with superior troops. You know, we get by on techs and tricks and stuff, and run and charge is a good trick, which is why he's in good if points go down. But he's not going to be anything better than that. Up next is Kritok Foulblade. He's probably at the top if good if points go down, because he does have a good war scroll. He's just 220 points for, again, a non-wizard, non-priest foot hero. He does give +1 to wound with Storm Vermin, which is good, and Storm Vermin are good, so that is, you know, decent. His double 3 claw steps ahead thing is cute, but it has to be a verminous unit that does the second thing, and in my experience, you're usually 3 claw stepsing like specialist units, like Doom Flayers or weapons teams or something like that, or maybe moving a Skryre up front, so it could be good. I don't think it's like quite as good as people thought on Kritok's release, but he's definitely playable. Yeah, good if points go down. I'm happy with that. Up next is the Rattling Guns, and these guys are literally like at the top of build around me tier. They're so insanely overtuned, it's not even funny. They're such a busted unit. They just do ludicrous damage for a really low points cost, and they actually kind of can require effort to remove because they're 3 wounds each, so it's like 18 wounds. You could basically compare them to Sentinels or Dark Shards or something like that, like a somewhat fragile chaff unit with decent range that just has absolutely hilarious output. They're like on average 63 shots or something stupid like that on 4s and 4s with crit auto or crit 2 hits and rend, and we have ways to give them +1 to hit and wound very easily, potentially +1 rend even. The unit is just mega juiced. I'm sure there's a teams list that exists that just skews like 18 Rattling Guns and just alphas and blasts people off the board, but I'm pretty sure basically every Skaven list for the next few months is going to start with 6 Rattling Guns and 40 Clan Rats. They're just such a stupidly good unit. Up next is Vizzik Scour, the brand new Verminlord cool build around me guy. Unfortunately, he's not in build around me tier. I think he might be the king if good if points go down tier. There could be an argument made for good inclusion. This guy's biggest problem is where the meta is right now. If the meta was not like a shooting hero sniping meta, then he would be highly excellent because he makes our melee lists very strong and able to go toe-to-toe with the other good melee armies in the game. And there's a couple matchups like by himself that he makes trivial. Like he completely destroys Trogs because -1 attacks is so crippling for them. Double fight with some of our good melee hammers like Storm Vermin and Stormfiends and some other troops that don't start with Storm probably. Like he's pretty good. Double fight is really insanely strong, and so is -1 attacks. He's got a good rampage that's good for tech, and he's not durable, but he requires efforts to kill. 5-up save kind of hurts, and is why is like one of the main hit. That plus him being 450 points is why he's in good if points go down tier, because he's just a bit too fragile and just a bit too expensive. If he went down like 30 or 40 points, I would say he would be good inclusion tier. And if for whatever reason they changed him to be a 4-up save, he'd probably go up a tier 2. But as it stands, he has his use, and his use is you're probably playing him with like 60 Storm Vermin or something silly like that. He's kind of like Teclis or Nagash, where he dictates the entire style of your list. Like you're gonna build around him, which is why it's like so extra bad the meta right now, because if you're playing a list that has a single build around me hero that's enabling your list archetype, and he gets shot off the board turn 1 by foxes or long strikes or something, you probably just lose the game right there. And it's just too much of a risk right now. So that was a little bit rambly, but that's why Vizzik is in good if points go down tier. Up next are Clan Rats, build around me tier, 150 points for 20 bodies on a 5-up save that heals D3 models every turn. They're so good. They can even kind of fight decently, which is hilarious. They're have a small footprint when you resurrect them. They're great at stealing objectives. They're great at contesting objectives. They're great at being a mosh pit if you want to throw a -1 to wound and -1 to hit on them, and like have them just be a giant pit of unkillable rat. They're great. Like they're just the best, one of the best screens in the game, and screens are still very important right now, especially with all the alpha strike armies running around and all the fast cavalry unga bunga armies in the game. I like Clan Rats, they're great. Up next are Doom Flayers, and I've played a couple of games with these. I'm still waffling between build around me and good inclusion. I think I'm going to be conservative and put them in good inclusion right now. They do a ton of damage. They're basically the closest thing we've got to old Censor Bearers. They don't hit quite that hard, but 8d6 attacks at rend 1 damage 2 on 3s and 3s is pretty crazy. Like, yeah, they're definitely insane. It's something like 30 attacks on average, with potentially rend 2 damage 2 if you're fighting infantry, but almost always rend 1 damage 2, because why would you not charge the charge unit, the unit that does everything on a charge? They're pretty fast for a Skaven unit. Like, obviously they're a Skaven unit, so their movement characteristic is 2d6. It is 2d6 plus 3, so you know, there's a little bit of they're like, you know, they minimum move 5, which is slower than our other troops, but on average they move 10, which is highly excellent. This is, you know, as fast as our Verminlords. So I like this unit a lot. They're probably top of good inclusion tier. I've had a lot of fun with them. They make some matchups really trivial, like they just crap on certain infantry in the game, like Zangors and Gluttons and stuff like that have bad saves and rely on wound density, because these guys just have pure output. So I like them a lot. Definitely think they're good. Warlock Engineer. He used to be good inclusion, I think, or maybe good if points go down. I think I'm gonna put him in meme tier now, because he buffs Giselles, and Giselles are one of our worst shooting units now, and he lets them hero snipe, and Giselles just don't really have the great range that they used to. And hero sniping is already niche, because there's only like 3 or 4 armies that are running OP foot heroes that you want to snipe. So meme tier, not great. Gracier on foot though, highly excellent, highly great. Build around me for sure. He doesn't really like, he's not a build around me, like he enables a strategy, but I mean, he kind of does, because he gives you good regiment options for a cheap price, which allows you to make your lists better. And he's definitely like our most efficient foot hero that's not a Verminlord or whatever. He's highly good, like a single cast at 3d6 dropping the lowest with about a 10% chance to auto cast with good regiment options for like 120 points. He's amazing. I'm including him about in maybe 2/3 of my lists right now. There's competition between him and the Arch Warlock, who coincidentally I'm talking about next, who's probably also built around me tier. There's competition between those two because they're both single casters. The Grey Seer is a better caster and has better regiment options, but the Arch Warlock has a really useful effect, which I will talk about right now. What the Arch Warlock does is he gives you essentially an extra command point. He gives you a free unleash or a free cover fire every turn, which essentially reads you get +1 command point every turn, which is potentially 2 extra command or +1 command point every battle round, because you can cover fire in your opponent's turn. So he's essentially giving you an extra command point, which is really, really strong. We all know how good command points are right now, and especially how good cover fire is. And he's still a wizard, so there's competition between the Arch Warlock and the Grey Seer. I think the Grey Seer is a lot more usable in most lists, but I think the Arch Warlock has a slightly better niche, if that makes sense. So, bit of a rambly explanation, but I think they're both built around me tier. Up next is Warp Fire Throwers, and I don't really know what tier to put these guys in, actually. So these guys' problem is that they're really, really short ranged. They have good damage and they have shooting combat, which is two things that's really strong, but they only shoot 10 inches, which is hilariously short. At that point, they're almost a melee unit, and they're very, very fragile. I think I could see myself maybe playing a couple, like 1 unit of these guys, maybe 1 reinforced unit of these guys if they go down a few points. Because don't get me wrong, having a shooting attack that's Ren 2 base with like volume of dice that also is shooting combat is very good. It's just the limiting factor of the 10-inch range that makes them hard to use. I'll probably put them in good if points go down tier for now. I don't think they're a bad war scroll, and I don't think they're a meme, because they're actually like, you know, their war scroll is good. I just don't know if they're quite a good inclusion. So good if points go down for now. Jezzails. God, this poor unit, man. They used to be so good. They used to be one of our best war scrolls by far, and then they just got gutted in the Battletome. They lost their free +1 to hit. They lost 6 inches of range, and that was like what was making them so good. I mean, they did gain a unit chief, so they have 13 shots instead of 12 in a reinforced unit, or 7 shots instead of 6 in a base unit, which is like a little bit of a bump in damage. It takes them from like 7 on average to 8 on average that you're getting through. But they're 150 points, and you know what else is 150 points? Rattling guns. So as long as rattling guns are as good as they are, they're going to make basically all of our other shooting units obsolete. So that's a little bit of an internal balance issue. Rattling guns probably need to be a little bit more expensive, or the other shooting units need to get cheaper. I'm of the opinion that the other shooting units need to get cheaper, because I don't think rattling guns are too good. I think they just are a really efficient unit. They're basically on par with sentinels and dark shards and other shooting units from other armies who cost similarly. So, tangent aside, I think Jezzails are probably bottom of good if points go down tier, because points will only save them to some degree. I think the unit just got nerfed a little bit too hard. Another shooting unit that's just outshone by our other shooting is Acolytes. Probably also good if points go down. I could see a world where you play these guys, because they do have shooting combat, they do have good output when they're buffed up, and they are 2 wounds in infantry, so they can absorb good buffs and maybe possibly be a front line with a 6-up save. Sure, Keegan. They're fine. They're acolytes. They're cool looking at least, but probably good if points go down. They're just, like I said, and you're probably going to see this a lot with a lot of our shooting units. They're just worse than rattling guns. Up next is the Warbringer. He's good if points go down tier. He's a mediocre melee monster hero, smash hammer, who's kind of fast. He's like okay in melee. His rampage is okay. He's got okay durability and decent damage. He's just a decent unit. He's completely outshone by the Deceiver, who's the best Verminlord by far, and he's less useful than Skryre, but is also more usable because he's cheaper. I think he's good if points go down. Maybe if he's like sub 300 or 300 exactly, he sees play, but 360 feels like a lot for him. Maybe 320 you could play him, but you're going to be hard-pressed to play him over a reinforced unit of Doomflayers. Reinforced unit of Doomflayers literally do double the damage that he does and are almost as fast. So, you know, he's mediocre. Speaking of mediocre monsters, we got the King of Good if Points. King of Good if Points go down in tier. Little Brood Terror there. I love the guy. He's really cool looking. He's really funny. He's got a great rampage, a decent shooting attack, and decent melee. But he's got a 6-inch move and 12 wounds on a 5-up save with no ward. That's not good. He's very fragile. He needs to go down like 100 points, probably. He's 300 points right now, which is just hilariously expensive for how fragile he is. Like, a Verminlord is like 340 or 360 and is 13 wounds with a 4-up save and a 5-up ward, and does more melee damage, and is a wizard. The Brood Terror has -1 to hit, which is good. A mediocre melee attack, a mediocre shooting attack, and 12 wounds on a 5-up save with no ward. Like, that math ain't mathin'. He needs to go down at least like 80 to 100 points, in my opinion. I think 220 is when you maybe start looking at him, because he's got a good war scroll. But man, is he expensive. I don't know what GW was cooking with this guy. Like, he's awesome, but what is that points value? Similar story with the Hell Pit, who's slightly better because he's slightly cheaper and does more damage in melee, and is also faster and is technically more durable. The Hell Pit's just a better Brood Terror right now. The only difference that they got is the Brood Terror has a better rampage because -1 to hit is super strong. But with how fragile he is, -1 to hit is not keeping him alive. The Hell Pit at least maybe can roll a 5-up to stay alive, which is kind of funny, but they're both just too expensive. They just need to get cheaper. Clawlord, meme. Clawlord on mount, meme. They're both foot heroes or mounted foot heroes that don't give a buff, aren't a wizard, and aren't a priest. What does that mean? It means they're bad. They're not completely useless. The Clawlord might be. The Clawlord might be a bad war scroll, but I think the Clawlord is a bad war scroll, but the Clawlord on mount at least is kind of fast and can kind of fight, and maybe will do something once in your game, whereas the Clawlord on foot will do nothing in your game. So that's that. Verminlord Corruptor, meme tier, because he's got one funny little strategy, which is called spam plague packs and get great plagues off. Smile. Yeah, he's a 300 and something point priest that's bad in melee and is kind of fast. He doesn't have any tech anymore because the Pestilens subfaction got nerfed. You have to be in combat now. If this guy's in combat, he failed to kill whatever he was in combat with and probably got clapped back and died because he's really piss poor in melee and he doesn't have survivable mobility options like the Deceiver does. So, Master Molder. Oh, this poor guy. He's a meme, probably. He gives +1. Just one. +1 to charge. It used to be +2, but they felt like that was too good for some reason. So he's now only +1 to charge. and he gives you a flat 3 heal. He is cheap. I guess if you want to run Thanquil's Mutated Menagerie, that's fine. He's playable, but overall, he's a meme. So anyway, moving on, we've got the Doom Wheel. Bad War Scroll. Nothing much to say about it. It just doesn't do anything. It's terrible. It has no shooting output, no melee output, and it's super fragile. It's fast, I guess, but it's too expensive for how fast it is. If you want a fast skirmish unit, play Doom Flayers, which I talked about already. They're awesome. Doom Wheel is not. I'm not going to spend any more time indulging this terrible War Scroll. Do better, GW. Thankfully, we only have a few of those. Up next is Night Runners, and these guys are good inclusion. My buddy Warpfire Minis really loves these guys, and if you want to see like top tier play of these guys, go over to his channel. I like them. They're fast. They have a pre-game move, which is nice to help with battle tactics like take the flanks or seize the center. They have a decent shooting attack with crit auto, which is nice because it's a bucket of dice. They have a bucket of dice with crit melee or crit mortal in melee, which is nice. They're very fragile, but they're not terribly expensive. You could run a whole bunch of them and get some value. If you're running a Deathmaster, you can make him run and charge, which is kind of cute. Overall, they're not a bad unit. I definitely think that they can slot in most lists and you'll get some value out of them. You know, they're cheap skirmishy damage, you know, fast screen. They can redeploy 4 if you have a Verminlord Deceiver, which is kind of cute. Yeah, overall not a bad unit. Speaking of Verminlord Deceiver, this is best guy. I love him so much. He's easily the best Verminlord, and it's not close. He's so insanely mobile. He does decent damage. What saves him, he does have the somewhat mediocre combat profile, 8 attacks, damage 2, but he's got rend 3 and crit mortal, so he can armor pierce and snipe heroes and stuff. And then he also has a shooting attack that's 6 attacks at damage 2. So when you put those together, it's almost like he has 14 attacks at damage 2, which is much, much, much better. That's, you know, about the same as a Bloodthirster, maybe a little bit better. So he's much better at dealing damage than you would think. He can be so incredibly hard to pin down and hard to kill with the Scurry Away command trait and his funny 4-up teleport ability. That ability by itself has so much insane potential for playmaking, and it is so much fun. You play him like 2 games and you hit 1 4-up and you're instantly addicted. He's just so much fun and he's so strong, especially since there's loose definitions of what counting as being in combat is in 4th edition. So you can walk up to an endless spell or walk up to a terrain feature and then count as being in combat, so you can use that to trigger your funny 4-up and then teleport to something else. Another thing you could do is you could teleport and then scurry away. He's just like, he can cover so much ground so quickly with those abilities, and he's also a wizard on top of all that. So yeah, he's amazing. One of our best units, definitely the best Verminlord. He's a tiny bit expensive, but it doesn't feel like he is. You want to play this guy. He's so much fun. Somebody you don't want to play is the Plague Claw. I'm gonna say it's a bad War Scroll, honestly. The problem is it's outshone by all of our other shooting units. It doesn't do great damage, and the strike for last effect only applies if it does damage. It's based on how many models it kills, so if I remember correctly. So you're basically never going to get this against hyper elite stuff or a god model or something like that. You're only going to get it pretty much against like infantry. So not amazing. Don't love him. Yeah, he's pretty mediocre. Up next is the Plague Priest on Plague Furnace. I'm gonna put him in meme tier because there's some matchups and some funny things you can do with him because he's got the -1 ward aura and he is a priest and he's kind of durable. That being said, he's not terribly useful. He's only a priest 1 for costing like 340 points. He's slow. He's decently durable for Skaven. 15 wounds on a 4-up, 5-up is kind of durable. And he does like okay damage. but overall, I'm not like his war scroll doesn't spark joy. Like, he doesn't have that many practical applications. He doesn't have that much tech. He's kind of funny in the Pestilens subfaction because he's hard to kill. He can always get the 3-inch pile in if he's in combat, but he's not really going anywhere with just 3 inches. And most of our enhancements aren't super good on him, so he's just kind of a wasted hero slot. If you want a priest, just play the Plague Pack. Spoiler alert, the Plague Pack is good inclusion. It's like a really cheap priest that can also double as a screen, that has a once per game reroll for its prayer if you roll a 1, which is about the best ability you can have for a priest right now, because rolling a 1 is real bad. You lose, you lose ritual points and you fail your prayer. So if you want to pour into our prayers and you want to play with like Storm Vermin or Rat Ogres or Stormfiends or something like that, definitely a decent inclusion. I could see you running 1 or 2 units of Plague Pack happily in a list with Storm Vermin. I think I talked about Kritok being good if points go down. I think he's a tiny bit of a trap unless he goes down in points, mostly because the Plague Pack unit exists, because we have a +1 to wound prayer that's really easy to get off for Storm Vermin. So I think there's really no reason to run Kritok when you could run just a Plague Pack that's going to be 60 points cheaper, technically more durable, and praise to get, potentially even more useful effects. Like with the prayer, you could potentially get crit mortal, which is pretty crazy with Storm Vermin with, the amount of attacks that they have. It's like 60 attacks. It's like 10 mortal wounds. That's really good. So yeah, Plague Pack good. Up next are Plague Monks, and these guys fell from grace a little bit because Clan Rats are just better. They're going to be in good inclusion just because it's still 140 points for 20 wounds. That does some mortal wounds before they die, and they have attacks that exist, but the 5-up save plus the battle recursion that Clan Rats have for only 10 points more is like 9 times out of 10 going to be better. And also Clan Rats are much easier to fit in regiments than Plague Monks, because basically every one of our heroes can include at least 1 unit of Clan Rats, whereas only Pestilens and Masterclan can include Plague Monks. So Plague Monks are fine. They might not be in good inclusion. They might be good if points go down now, because in my mind, there's really no reason to run them unless you're really being counting points for some reason, because Clan Rats are just a straight upgrade in every way. And moving on, we've got Rat Ogres. I'm the Rat Ogre guy. I love these guys. I've played so many games with them. My Masters list included 6 Rat Ogres. I've basically had a unit of 6 Rat Ogres in every one of my lists in the Index and the Battletome so far. And even I have to admit they are completely outshone by Doomflayers. Doomflayers are just straight up better. They're faster and do more consistent damage and are about the same durability. Rat Ogres, I think, are good if points go down. They have a good shooting attack. They have good, decent melee, if a bit swingy. They have some wounds, and they can absorb some really good buffs, granted. That's one weakness of the Doomflayers. They are war machines and Skryre, so they basically have 0 synergies. Molder Infantry has a ton of synergies. They can absorb our prayers. They can absorb Molder subfaction bonuses and healing for the Master Molder and all sorts of good stuff. And they can absorb, like Vizzik's prayers, and they have like a higher ceiling that they can go because they can absorb so many buffs. And they're, fine. They're a little slow. That's my biggest issue with them, is a slow melee hammer. You're just kind of waiting for your opponent to come towards you, and then you're going to countercharge them, or they're just going to get shot because they're so fragile. If they were just a tiny bit cheaper, like maybe 150, so it's 300 for a unit of 6 Rat Ogres, I would love this unit, but they're just a hair expensive right now. If they went down 10 or 20 points, I would like them a lot. Rattling Warp Blaster. I think this thing is a bad war scroll. It's just a weaker rattling gun with slightly longer range that hurts itself and has crit auto instead of crit 2 hits. Like, yeah, it's got 20-inch range, which is cute, but when you're overcharging it, it's just 6d6 attacks on 4s and 3s with crit auto. Rattling guns, a unit of 3, is 9d6 on 4s and 4s with crit 2 hits. Rattling guns just do way better damage in every way, shape, and form. There's like no reason to run the Rattling Warp Blaster at all. Unless this thing gets an insane points discount, I really don't see you running it. Up next is the Grey Seer on Screaming Bell, and I like him. He's good in a full melee list. He pairs really well with Vizzik. If you want to make a Vizzik melee list with like Rat Ogres or Storm Vermin, I think what you do is you do a Bell and then you do Vizzik, and they play off of each other really well, because the Bell could give your infantry a 6-up ward as well as potentially -1 to hit, and then Vizzik gives them -1 attack or double fight or something like that. They just play off of each other really well. I think the Bell is a good inclusion personally, because -1 to hit is very strong. It's a double caster. Basically all of our spells cast on 6s, which means even though you don't have a spell bonus, you're probably getting them off anyway. Yeah, he's really good. I like him. He actually does a surprising amount of melee damage. It's kind of funny. I took him to a GT a few weeks back. I was playing with him and 6 Stormfiends and 6 Rat Ogres, and he was actually kind of a pseudo hammer almost, because he's got like 11 attacks of damage too. He can randomly pop off, which is kind of hilarious. Yeah, I like him a lot actually. I think that might surprise some people, but I rate the Bell pretty highly. I think it's a good inclusion for sure. Plus the model still holds up. I'm not taking models into account, but I'm just partial to the model of the Screaming Bell. Up next is the Galvaneer. This guy is top of meme tier because there is a meme you can do with him. You can spam like 5 of them and then shoot a central unit in your opponent's army and do like splash mortal wounds to everything around it and just cut a giant hole in your opponent's army right off the rip, which is very funny. Like I said, it's a good meme. It harkens back to like the Knight Vexilor banner spam from Stormcast a few months ago with 3rd edition, which was kind of funny. But yeah, the once per battle for Scourges are a little overcosted. I'll talk about them next. Scourges are a little overcosted, so I don't think that the Galvaneer's buff for Scourges is that amazing. So he's basically just like a shooting foot hero that doesn't do very much, which means he's not very good. He's probably worse than the Engineer because the Engineer has 1 inherent actual use. They're both probably better than the Corruptor. I think we're just going to do a little ordering really quickly. I feel pretty good about that. Speaking of Scourges, yeah, so he's right there. Scourges, I'm going to put them in good if points go down, because they definitely will be good if points go down. They have 2d6 attacks on 2s and 4s with crit 2 hits. Hitting on 2s with crit 2 hits is amazing. And they have Rend 1 base, Rend 2 into Cavalry, which is amazing because Cavalry is usually super durable. They're only 2d6 attacks instead of 3d6, but hitting on 2s versus hitting on 4s make the math about the same when you compare it to Rattling Guns. But these guys are gonna end up being a little bit more consistent with just a little bit less output, but they're very expensive right now. They're like 190 for 3. Rattling Guns are 150. There's just no realm where you run these guys over Rattling Guns right now, unless you're just playing in a super cav heavy meta and you think that these guys are just going to get you better results. They might, but if these guys go down 20 points, 30 points, and Rattlings go up 10 or 20 points, I could see Scourges being better for sure. Yeah. Up next are Stormfiends. These guys are still definitely good inclusion. They're still one of our best like anvil units and one of our best hammer units. Having Rend 2 on all their weapon profiles while wounding on 2s with all their weapon profiles just makes them a highly consistent unit if you give them all out attack. They do great damage, super durable. I wouldn't really shoot with them. They're not a great shooting unit anymore. They're better in melee now. The main reason, in my opinion, that you take these guys is because they can deep strike in your opponent's movement phase, which is a good trick, good for catching people off guard, and good for battle tactics and such. They can be a really hard unit to play around, which is always good, forcing your opponent to make difficult choices. That's the main strength of Stormfiends, in my opinion. They're a hair expensive. I think I'd like to see them come down 10 or 20 points, and then they'll feel really solid. I think the reason that they're as expensive as they are, though, is because of Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie. Side tangent, I hate that the Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie exists because it means that all of our Molder troops have to be horribly overcosted. Because if they decrease the points, then Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie becomes really strong. But they're all really weak in the base Skaven army, and they can't get cheaper, otherwise Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie will become too strong, probably. Because already, like, 12 Stormfiends in the Mutated Menagerie is really obnoxious, because they just become so durable and so hitty. I'm just not a fan of it. I wish that we didn't have Armies of Renown, but c'est la vie. Up next are Storm Vermin. Good inclusion for sure. They're just absolute blenders. They do tons and tons of damage. They're not what I'd call durable, but we are a really debuff heavy army. You can get them like to be -1 to hit and wounded and -1 incoming attacks against them, which will make them feel nigh unkillable. You know, we also have a route to give them +1 save, which is cute. I mean, you can usually pretty consistently get them to -1 to be wounded and -1 to be -1 to hit, because we have a couple of sources of -1 to hit. And then if you have Vizzik, you can get -1 attacks. I will say they are just about the best damage in the book, with double fight from Vizzik and buffs like +1 to hit and wound. They slap omega hard, especially when they get the +1 attack on the, or +1 rend on the charge from the Verminous subfaction, or like anti-charge +1 rend. Super strong damage. You know, they are a bit fragile. I kind of wish they would have gotten the bodyguard rule where they get a 5-up for themselves and whatever hero they're guarding, instead of just giving the hero they're guarding a ward. Probably makes them too strong. I mean, Graveguard are basically the same, and Graveguard can get resurrected and can double fight too, so why can't Storm Vermin? I don't know. It's whatever though, they're still a good unit. Up next is my boy, Thanquol. He's going to go right up there with the Deceiver and Build Around Me tier. He's still probably one of our best heroes. I'm not sure if he's better than the Deceiver or not. They're probably about the same. They play off of each other really well. I think most of my good lists are starting with Thanquol and the Deceiver and 6 Rattling Guns. And then you just kind of flavor with whatever else you want. Thanquol he just does so many things well. He casts 2 spells at +1. His War Scroll spell is broken. Blocking commands in this edition is so strong. He's got a fine rampage. He's got a fine shooting attack, decent melee. He heals, which is awesome. He can, you know, skitter leap himself now. Like, being able to skitter leap himself, especially on the opponent's turn, because he's got the +1, he can get off skitter leap super reliably, is just such a great trick. It can make him really mobile. My only issue with him is that he's an 8-inch move now, which is quite slow for a monster, but he can teleport a lot, and he's decent in melee, so I guess that makes up for it by somewhat. He's still just amazing. He just, like I said, he just does so many things well. Up next is Screech. He definitely goes in good if points go down tier, probably near the top, behind the monsters, maybe behind Vizzik. Vizzik's probably better than him. He's pretty hitty. He's got a bunch of useful buffs on his War Scroll, but the problem is the way you're list building in Skaven, the sub-factions work against Screech. Our sub-factions want you to pick one clan and pour into it, and Screech wants you to have like a soup of things in your list, so you can have multiple units to give buffs to. So Screech kind of in limbo zone. I kind of wish he was more of a solo operator like he was in 3rd edition, where his buffs mostly affected himself. Now he does have every clan keyword now, so all the buffs he gives on his War Scroll do affect him, which is neat. And he has some good synergies. The +1 to hit for all Skryre troops is really amazing if you want to build an Alpha Strike list. And the heal for Molder is fine. The +1 rend for Ashen units is cute. Giving your Night Runners rend 1 and giving your Deceiver rend 4 is hilarious. His buffs are fine, and his spell is still pretty good. You know, even though it's 5s instead of 4s, you can still spike and deal like 6 mortal wounds with the spell and snipe a hero, which is really good. It gives you some additional clan rat resurrection. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point because I don't know what to say about him. He's just too expensive. At the end of the day, he's just too expensive. He needs to go down 40 points probably. He needs to just cost in line with the other Verminlords. 430 is kind of ridiculous for what he does. He's still, at the end of the day, only 13 wounds on a 4-up, 5-up. Bombardier, meme tier. You can spam him like you can spam the Galvaniers and have funny Rocket Man that randomly does 12 damage. But he's not good. Same with the Warp Grinder. The Warp Grinder is like a really fun concept until you read the line that says on a 4-up you do this, and now him having any competitive viability just completely goes out the window. The Deceiver makes it work because he's got the 3-up to fall back on in case he fails the 4-up. You know, he's got the 3-up from Scurry Away, and he's also kind of durable and mobile, and you're going to give yourself a bunch of chances to get the 4-up, and one single 4-up is like game-breakingly good, but one single 4-up with the Warp Grinder is just not really. He's so hard to use because his target unit has to be more than 6 inches away from other enemy units, and you have to roll a 4-up, and they have to come out within range and everything. Like, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to use this guy. And are like the best units that you would use with him are units that have large footprints and want to absorb buffs. None of our troops are like super reliable just with their base melee profile. Most of them want a buff of some kind, and Stormfiends are deep strike by themselves. Like, there's just no reason you run this guy. He's not good. Yeah, it's probably a bad war scroll, honestly. It's just like a fundamentally cooked war scroll. It's not. You're not going to get value out of him. Warp Lightning Cannon. Probably top of meme tier. Maybe bottom of good if points go down. Problem with the Warp Lightning Cannon is the same problem with all of our other mediocre shooting units and all of our other artillery, where they're just completely outclassed by the Warp Spark weapons battery. That shooting unit just makes basically all of our other shooting units obsolete because it's just a shooting damage efficiency contest, and whichever unit is the best is going to be the one that's played. So we have like 5 or 6 different shooting units that all basically do the same thing, which is damage or a certain, and then you pick the one that has the best damage type in everything, which is Rattling Guns, because it's buckets of dice at Rend 1, which means it's going to be good into every army. Like, most of our shooting units just can't hold a candle to Rattling Guns, so most of them are not good. If Rattling Guns get nerfed, maybe you can see some of our other shooting units rise up, but as of now, there's no reason to run the others, and the Warp Lightning Cannon is like our best artillery, but artillery is just worse than troops because you can bring troops back. Like, that's just how it is. And then we've got the Warp Seer, who I'm going to put in good inclusion. He's the second best Verminlord after the Deceiver, because he's got a whole bunch of tricks like Strike Last and 1d6 charge and plus 2 inches to 3 claw steps move, which are all good things at a pretty decently low price tag. And he's also a double caster, so like he's like a really good support piece. The problem is he's kind of fighting for the same spot in your list that Thanquol is, because and in my experience Thanquol's just better because Thanquol can fight. I mean, they fight about the same. I guess they're both 6 attacks, 4s and 2s, Rend 2, 3. Thanquol, he's just, his spell is so insanely good right now because commands are so good. And minus 1d6 charge, don't get me wrong, is a good spell, but I think Thanquol's spell is better. He has the casting bonus, and he's got the healing, which makes a big difference. Verminlords tend to die really easily if you don't heal them. So I like the Warp Seer. He's definitely good. Like, I know I just said a bunch of reasons why Thanquol is better, but don't get me wrong, the Warp Seer is definitely good. If you want to play him, you absolutely can. He is extremely playable. I just, like I said, I think he's fighting for the same spot in your list that Thanquol is. And I think right now Thanquol's just a little bit better. If we get some points changes in the future, I could definitely see the Warp Seer jumping up to build around me because he's really close. He is really quite good. But yeah, he's not quite there yet. And last is the endless spells. I'm gonna put them in good inclusion. It's mostly because of the Bell of Doom. The Bell of Doom is really strong. The Warp Lightning Vortex is like a waste of space, and the Vermintide is solid. Since they're free, they're a good inclusion. Since Morbid got nerfed, we're starting to explore other spell lores. Currently, I think the best one is probably Aether Rot Machinations, the one with the cogs, because we're running Verminlords and -1 to hit is super good for them, and Swords is fine. and Pendulum is really, really good at movement trapping, and Skaven gets by a lot on tricks, so any more tricks that we can field is really good. Our Spell Lord doesn't really give us any tricks, but -1 to wound is just a brute amazing debuff, and we have a lot of infantry that can soak it up. I mean, 40 clan rat or 20 clan rats with -1 to be wounded will actually live like us more than you would think they would. And combined with their D3 regeneration every turn, they can be kind of a pain. Like, I've had opponents take like 3 turns to kill a unit of clan rats. You know, it's really good. And it also helps with some specific matchups. Like, a lot of the elf matchups can be kind of hard for us, like Idoneth, Lumineth, and Doc. And -1 to wound is absolutely backbreaking for them because most of their stuff wounds on 4s. So, yeah. Bell of Doom, amazing. Vermintide, solid. Warp Lightning Vortex, terrible. Doo-doo Brown Toilet Cheer, trash. Like, not good. So let me take a little minute just to look over this tier list really quickly, just before I finalize it and post this video for you guys. I think I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah, I think that these are just fundamentally bad War Scrolls. Most of these are just memes, with like one niche use, or they're funny. I think, you know, Good If Points Go Down is a pretty large tier with a lot of stuff, but I think a lot of stuff in our book is overcosted. So, you know, that. And then, yeah, I agree with the good inclusion and build around me. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other content you want to see. I think my next video is going to be diving into some of the War Scrolls, or the changes between the Index and the Battletome or something like that. Or I might, you know, post some other tier lists or something, just AOS content. You guys seem to like the Skaven content, so I think I'm gonna do some more Skaven videos. I might do like some list breakdowns or some tips and tricks or something like that. So let me know what you guys would like to see, and I'll see y'all in the next one.